In India, we have a single integrated judiciary and we have a three-tier system, and in this hierarchy, the Supreme Court is at the top. So the Supreme Court's decision is binding on all the other courts in the country, such as the high courts or the lower or subordinate courts. So the law declared by the Supreme Court shall be binding on all the courts within the territory of India. Apex means the highest point of something. So by that logic, the Supreme Court is known as the apex court of the country or the apex court of India. Now, what makes the Supreme Court the apex court, or what is the importance of the Supreme Court? So firstly, in India, we have a federal setup in which there is a government at the national or the central level, and there are various governments at the state level. Powers are also divided between these several governments. In such a situation, there might be disputes or conflicts arising between the central government and the state governments, or between various state governments. In such a situation, it is the Supreme Court which has to interpret the Constitution and use its meaning to solve or resolve these disputes. So the Supreme Court has to interpret the Constitution, which is why the Supreme Court is known as the final interpreter and the guardian of the Constitution, because the decision given by the Supreme Court while interpreting the Constitution is final and binding on all of the courts and everyone within the country. Secondly, you've heard about the fundamental rights. You know that our Constitution guarantees us 6 very fundamental rights, such as the right to equality, the right to freedom, right against exploitation, and all of these other fundamental rights. But these rights also have to be guaranteed. So in such a situation, when our fundamental rights are being violated, we can move the court. We can go to the high courts or the Supreme Court, and they will give us back our fundamental rights by issuing writs or written commands. So the Supreme Court is the protector of our fundamental rights, and it can issue writs for the enforcement of these fundamental rights. To know more about writs, you can click on the link for the iDictionary feature. Now thirdly, our Constitution has been created more than 70 years back. Now in today's time, if we follow the Constitution line by line, it will not match the reality of the day. So in these cases, when the Constitution fails to reflect the contemporary issues, the Supreme Court gives new meaning to the Constitution and helps it adapt to the changed societal conditions. So the Supreme Court gives new meaning to the Constitution to meet the new situations. Along with that, the Supreme Court is also the highest court of appeal in India. We've heard about the system of appeals a lot of time. So if a case is there in the high courts and the person feels that injustice has been done or the verdict that has been given by the high court is not just, he can make an appeal to the Supreme Court. Therefore, if a person feels that he has been denied justice by a high court, he can appeal to the Supreme Court to hear or review his case. But since the Supreme Court is the highest court in the nation, appeals from the Supreme Court do not lie anywhere. So the Supreme Court is the highest court of appeal in India. So therefore, in India, any case which involves a dispute relating to the government of India or the government of a state in India goes to the Supreme Court. In these matters, the Supreme Court has original jurisdiction. We've also talked about how an impartial and an independent judiciary is very important. The Indian judiciary is supposed to protect the liberties and the rights of the citizens and also administer justice in an equitable and fair manner. The Supreme Court helps cope up with the new challenges that sometimes emerge in the democracy of India. It gives various landmark judgments which are very important in India. Let us see one of the cases of such a landmark judgment. Do you think that the right to property should be a fundamental right? Well, when the Constitution first came into existence, it was a fundamental right. So when the Constitution came into force, the right to property was included as a fundamental right. So at that time, we had 7 fundamental rights instead of 6. But in 1978, the Parliament passed the 44th Amendment Act, which made the right to property a legal right. Now, to understand why this happened, why the right to property was removed from the fundamental right to become a legal right, the Supreme Court played an important role. To understand this, we'll have to talk about the Kesavananda Bharati versus State of Kerala case. Now, in 1969, the Kerala government put an amendment to an existing Land Reforms Act. It was known as the Kerala Land Reforms Amendment Act 1969. And Kesavananda Bharati, who was a Hindu priest, in 1970 he filed a case challenging this Land Reform Act and its constitutional amendments 24, 25 and 29. Because this Land Reforms Act was threatening to strip his mutt of its property, which was the only source of income for his ashram. Now, why did he file this case? Because he felt like his fundamental rights were being violated. Which fundamental rights are we talking about? Article 25, which is the right to practice, propagate or profess any religion of his choice. Article 26, which is the right to religious denominations and to managing his own properties. And Article 31, which was at that time the right to property. Now, this case was taken up by the Supreme Court. Now, you must already know that by Article 368 of the Constitution, the Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution. By that power, the 25th Amendment Act 1971 was passed, by which it said that any private property can be taken up by the government and used for public purposes. By that power, it was curtailing one of the very fundamental rights, the right to property. So it brought up a lot of questions, such as, does the Parliament have unlimited power to amend the Constitution? Or can the Parliament amend the Constitution to that extent, such as taking away all of the fundamental rights? For example, if a flyover has to be built between 2 cities, and there is one land or one property that comes in between, does the government have the power to take away this property and just compensate the owner? Well, that case was heard by the largest ever constitutional bench in India, consisting of 13 judges, and the constitutions of 71 countries were analyzed. And finally, the Supreme Court gave a decision that the Parliament does have the power to amend the Constitution, but only to that extent as to not harming or changing the basic structure of the Constitution. So the foundation of a building, if you just remove it, the building won't stand, right? Just like that, if you remove the foundation of the Constitution or the foundation of the Indian democracy, then the Indian democracy would fall. So that is why this decision by the Supreme Court is considered as a landmark judgment, because it is believed that if the Supreme Court gave a different verdict that day, then India might have degenerated into a totalitarian state. So this was an example of one of the landmark judgments that the Supreme Court gave and hence helped save the Indian democracy. Now let's talk about the composition of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court consists of the Chief Justice of India, who is the head of all the judges of the Supreme Court and all the other courts of the country, and not more than 33 other judges, which makes the total strength of the Supreme Court as 34. This is the maximum strength of the Supreme Court. Now, who appoints the Chief Justice of India? The Chief Justice of India is the highest judicial authority in the country. He is the head of all of the judges. So, as he has such an important position, it is the President who appoints the Chief Justice of India, as the President is the head of the state. Now, we already know that the President does not take decisions by himself. He is always advised by the Council of Ministers and the Prime Minister. So, the President appoints the Chief Justice of India in consultation with the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. Along with this, the President also has to consult the outgoing Chief Justice of India, that is, the Chief Justice who will be retiring. And it is a convention or a tradition since independence that the outgoing Chief Justice of India recommends the senior most judge of the Supreme Court as his successor, or the next Chief Justice of India. Along with that, the President, if he feels like, can also consult the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. Now, since all the judges of the Supreme Court are sitting at the apex court of the country, which represents the country at the national level, therefore, they hold very important positions and they are also appointed by the President. In the appointment of all the other judges of the Supreme Court, the President consults with the Chief Justice of India. And the Chief Justice of India also has to consult with 4 senior most judges of the Supreme Court. This is known as the collegium. So, the collegium system is a system in which a college of people, that is a group of people who are judges, are consulted for the appointment of other judges. So, in this collegium system, the collegium gives its recommendation to the law minister, who forwards it to the Prime Minister to advise the President in appointing the judges of the Supreme Court. So, now can you answer this question? Who appoints the Chief Justice of India and other judges of the Supreme Court? Is it the Prime Minister, the Council of Ministers, the President, or the Vice President? Yes, it is the President who appoints the Chief Justice of India and all other judges of the Supreme Court. Now we'll be talking about the eligibility criteria to be able to become a judge of the Supreme Court. First and foremost, one needs to be a citizen of India. The Supreme Court works on the trust or the faith of the people of the country. The people of the country would have more faith in the judicial system, including the Supreme Court, if they feel like it is their own people or the people of the country. Along with that, the judges of the Supreme Court are also part of the apex court of the country, which represents the judicial system of the country at the national and international levels. So they have to be well informed regarding the laws of India, the constitution, the issues of the people, cultural identity of India, and so many other things, which is why it makes more sense to have an Indian citizen as a judge of the Supreme Court. Secondly, he must be a distinguished person in the field of law in the opinion of the President. Now, as we've seen that it is the apex court of the country we are talking about. So, it has a very high position, which is why we would want this person to have an eminent personality. So, he has to be a scholar in the field of law and have a vast experience in managing the system of law in India. In the appointment of the judges of the Supreme Court, we can see that seniority is an important factor, or people who are more experienced are considered more worthy of getting these positions. So, a person who will be eligible to become a judge of the Supreme Court will have to have a vast experience in the field of law. So, he must have been a judge of the High Court or 2 or more such courts for 5 years or longer. So, at least for 5 years, he needs to be a judge of the High Courts or 2 or more such High Courts. Or he must have been an advocate of the High Court or 2 or more such courts for 10 years or longer. Advocate is lawyer. So, since the profession of a lawyer and a judge is not exactly the same, so that is why an advocate needs more experience in the High Court to be eligible to become a judge of the Supreme Court. Now that we've talked about all of the eligibility criteria to become a Supreme Court judge, do you think that these eligibility criteria make sense and are helping in selecting the most worthy and deserving judges to the Supreme Court? Or do you think there is some extra features or extra criteria which should be added to ensure the selection of the best judges? As we have seen that the Constitution gives a lot of weightage to the age factor. The senior judges are given an upper hand because they are held to have more experience and thus more mature to handle the cases that come to the Supreme Court. But since the Supreme Court's decision is final and binding on all the other courts of the country, do you think that there should be a formal criteria regarding some other things as well? For example, do you think that the success history or the performance history of the judges in passing judgments which have not been overturned or reversed at a later stage should be a formal criteria while selecting the judges? But appointing the judges on the basis of seniority is justified on grounds that they have more experience and hence are assumed to have passed important judgments. So this feels justified. But what is your opinion on this? Any public official before entering into his public post has to take an oath. Just like that, the judges of the Supreme Court as well as the Chief Justice of India have to take an oath before entering into their positions. By this oath, they promise to uphold the sovereignty of the country and uphold the Constitution of India and to administer justice without having any bias. So, the oath of the Chief Justice of India is administered by the President and the oath of the other judges of the Supreme Court are administered by the Chief Justice of India. Now that we've talked about how a Supreme Court judge comes into power, let us talk about his tenure. So, a Supreme Court judge holds office till he attains the age of 65. So, judges of the Supreme Court retire at 65 years. For example, Ranjan Gogoi, who was the 46th Chief Justice of India, was turning 65 on 18th of November 2019. So, he retired at 17th November 2019, after which Sharad Arvind Bobde became the 47th Chief Justice of India. Upon his retirement, N.V. Ramana came into power as the 48th Chief Justice of India. Now, there have been a lot of discussions and debates regarding increasing the age of the judges of the Supreme Court and the High Courts. This is partly because there is a huge pendency of cases in India, which means that there are a lot of cases in India which are pending and are left to be administered justice to. So, if the ages of retirement of the Supreme Court and the High Court judges are increased, these people will be able to stay back longer and dispense of some of these cases. So, what do you think? Do you think that this would be beneficial for the judicial system as a whole? Now, we have seen how the tenure ends at 65 years, but the tenure of the Supreme Court judges can end before 65 years in two cases. The first one is resignation. If a judge of the Supreme Court sends his resignation letter to the President giving his reason for the resignation, he can resign from his office before 65 years. Other than this, a Supreme Court judge can also be removed from office before 65 years. So, how does a Supreme Court judge get removed from his position? It is exactly the same process as we learned in the removal of judges from the High Courts of India. A judge of the Supreme Court can be removed from his office only by the President's order. This is done to ensure the impartiality and independence of the judiciary in the country, and to ensure that the process is quite difficult to execute, so that no one can unilaterally or by bias remove a judge of the Supreme Court. He can be removed, but only on grounds of proven misbehavior or incapacity. To know more about how a Supreme Court judge can be removed from his position, you can click on the link for the iDictionary feature. Now, in 1991, the first ever motion to remove a Supreme Court judge was signed by 108 members of the Parliament. Justice V. Ramaswamy was a judge of the Supreme Court, but during his position as the Chief Justice of the Punjab and Haryana High Court, he had allegedly misappropriated some funds. So in 1991, a motion was initiated to remove Justice V. Ramaswamy. And in 1992, a high inquiry committee was set up by members of the Supreme Court judges. They looked into the case of Justice V. Ramaswamy and found him guilty of misappropriating the funds. So, he was supposed to be removed. However, the motion did not manage to get the required majority, and therefore the resolution was not passed, and Justice V. Ramaswamy held on to his position. Now let us talk about the salary and allowances of the Supreme Court judges. Just like the High Court judges, the salaries of the Supreme Court judges are also charged on the Consolidated Fund of India. They fall under the non-votable expenditures, which means that the Parliament cannot discuss and vote on their salaries. So for that reason, they also cannot be reduced during their term of office. The only exception is during a financial emergency, when the economic stability of the country is under threat. In such a circumstance, the salaries of the judges of the Supreme Court can be reduced. Other than the basic salaries, the judges of the Supreme Court also are entitled to certain benefits and allowances. For example, the judges of the Supreme Court are entitled to the use of an official residence without the payment of rent. They are also given medical and travel allowances, and they also get pensions after their retirement. This is to ensure that they can live a comfortable and financially stable retired life. So in this video, we've talked about everything regarding the Supreme Court. We've talked about why the Supreme Court is so important in a federal setup and in administering justice in very important cases. We've talked about the landmark judgment of the Kesavananda Bharati case. We've talked about the judges of the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice of India, how they are appointed and how they might be removed or they might resign from office. So the Supreme Court is the apex court of India and heads the Indian judiciary. It is very important and helps us administer justice and resolve disputes throughout the country. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. You can also register for free at deltastep.com or download the DeltaStep app to get access to all our 5,000 plus amazing videos as per your school syllabus. Master each topic with our adaptive practice technology. Get million+ questions with step-by-step solutions and unlimited mock tests. Get all your doubts resolved instantly. Learn via games and win amazing prizes like PlayStations and iPads. So at DeltaStep, learning is not just fun and easy, it is rewarding too. So register for free now.